Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. Welcome back for another episode of the Freight 360 podcast. This is episode 247. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, comment on YouTube, share us with your friends, colleagues, anybody that may want to consume our content. And you can go to freight360.net, get our full back catalog. Is that what they call it, right, Ben? Back catalog of all of our other episodes, content. And you'll see the Freight Broker Basics course. That's our educational package to we're going to talk a little bit today about how, some of the behind the scenes of starting a brokerage with. This will be your playbook for how to build your brokerage from scratch and obtain new customers, build those relationships, carriers, etc., and even hire. And we're going to talk about a lot of that today in our discussion in our episode. But make sure to check that out at our website. All right, Ben. What you got? What do you got going on? How's June? It's June now. We're officially hitting the summer months.
We are. Things going really well. Ava's birthday parties. Well, it was her birthday Monday, so we got her birthday party coming up Saturday that I'm super excited for.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah. And it's I don't know.
5?
It's just awesome at that age. Yeah, she's 5. Because I feel like when they turn 4 and 5, around there, it's still so new a birthday that they're so excited, right? It's up there with Christmas and then some. And everything is just fun to do. So even just us making arts and crafts and, making a birthday card for her was her favorite thing to do all week. So just having a blast with some of those little things. How's your littlest one doing, by the way?
She's good, man. Every day is different, trying to figure out sleep and all that. But it's what's wild is I get way more sleep than my wife and I'm still tired. Yes. And I'm not allowed to tell her that I'm tired. Because it's not even on the same level. But yeah, all good. Just trying to
I will tell you this. In hindsight, thinking about you and you're having your kid, I was thinking back to when Ava was that little. And I was thinking, and it was things that I made that were mistakes where something happened. And I realize now how tired I was during that period, right? I remember I hung something on the wall and I just missed the screw in the anchor. And then the screw just went in the drywall and it fell down later. And it was just, I was thinking about it, I'm I've done that thousands of times in my life. That's never happened. And there was 3 or 4 other little things. And I'm oh yeah, that was the first 2-3 months that we had Ava. Nobody slept. And I'm no wonder I had little to no focus in some of the other things. And that was also my first one. You got some practice under your belt going into your third.
For sure. Well, hang on one second. Classic dog barking. All right, what do we got? Anything on sports?
I got nothing really. Pirates won last night, but I couldn't go into too much beyond that, even to who pitched. I was just
I got something. So this is hockey, and everyone knows I'm a Bills fan, so I'm going to relate hockey to the Buffalo Bills. So it's the Stanley Cup Finals, and you've got the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, and they were interviewing. I think they were interviewing the coach of the Oilers, and they're what does championship experience mean for a team going in? Because they're playing against Florida, and Florida was in the Stanley Cup last year. So the coach is do you think that Stanley Cup experience is going to be meaningful for them playing against you? And the coach goes, why don't you ask the Buffalo Bills what Super Bowl experience means? How many times they lost in a row? And I was all right, I guess we're all rooting for Florida now.
Well said.
But that's all I got for sports. I thought that was kind of comical. News. Okay, is it this week that Ken Adamo is doing his little friendly debate with Sonar Strickland?
Yep.
Guy, right?
It happened yesterday, actually.
Oh, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Freight Caviar at least announced the winner.
What did he say?
Well, that Ken won. It looked like what the take was. But I haven't listened to the whole thing. I'm absolutely going to go back and listen to it.
I definitely need to listen to it. I didn't know it was done already. I don't know why I thought it was going to be today, which is a Wednesday when we record. But anyway, the Baltimore Bridge, everything. So they got the the ship is back to the
Yep.
port it left from. Full traffic supposed to be open, I think June 10th. We had it in our newsletter earlier this week. But good stuff.
You know what
The
else I was going to
dates
start?
for
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
What?
I was gonna, if you were good, finish what you were saying. I was gonna
No, it
something
was going on to a
completely
different thing,
different.
TIA related.
Okay. What I was just gonna add is like I was gonna spend just a minute or two, maybe in the beginning, to just reference whatever else I was reading that I think is applicable to anyone out there. Because people email us, ask us books, resources outside of this, and this is a book I think I sent to you. Super Communicators, Charles Duhigg. Did you
Yeah,
end
I
up getting
read
into
it
that at all?
based on your recommendation. Great
Yeah.
book, man.
Fantastic book. So, if anyone out there looking to improve your communication skills, and I mean, this goes far beyond sales, this is, well, it's directly applicable to getting customers and making money for sure. But even beyond that, like communication with family, friends, coworkers, staff, employees, your children, like it really helps. I think it helped me understand really the framework of why and when communication actually does occur and why it can't. And there's very common reasons why it doesn't actually happen. And there's lots of really good tips and ways that you can kind of practice getting better at this every day. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this is how everything happens in life, our ability to communicate through words. And I think the piece that's most often overlooked is the listening side. So anyway, anyone looking for more on that, I did a short YouTube video. I can't remember if it was the one that released last week or will. It'll be releasing in the next couple of days that has one of these techniques outlined, and just some good content for anyone that's looking outside or more material to improve and just get better at things.
You know, what's funny is I went to my like annual physical for my doctor the other day, and I was like, I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this as an opportunity to like just be super outgoing and talkative to everybody new that I've never met, right? Because there's always a new nurse or something, right?
Yep.
Doctor usually stays the same, but I go on there from the person that checked me in, the person that did my like height and weight, the person that was training the new person in the one room, like just super like friendly, talkative, and I think those are ways to like really work on and develop the muscle of how do I cold call a stranger? Well, it all starts with talking to the stranger at the doctor's office or the grocery store or the coffee shop. And that book, Super Communicators, is really, really good. And explaining, and he uses like a lot of historical references of like real, real situations and
Yes.
how these individuals use the tools in that book to, you know, basically um, like persuade an
Yes.
audience or really get the results that they want.
Well, and the
So
reality is too, like there's a great post that I saw the other day, and then I heard it referenced again somewhere else. But the author Kurt Vonnegut, it's like a short little essay or letter, but it shows up on posts and Facebook and other places. But he talks about exactly what you just said. He talks about the process of going to buy an envelope. And I think his wife makes fun of him, like, you could just buy a box. Why do you waste the time? Why are you doing any of this? Like, this is ridiculous. And he writes this like short essay on like, no, like you don't get it. It's the process of buying the envelope that is life, like meeting the person, the woman on the way to get the envelope, talking to the clerk at the store, having a
yeah,
discussion with the kid that was outside that door. He's like, this is where life happens. Everybody's so worried or nervous or anxious about what they have to do that they're literally missing living in the present and all of the things that you do and connecting with people along the way, right? And again, I think it ties a lot into what you're saying, like connecting and talking to these people when you're doing these things, right? Like, one, it is practice for sure for the job, but also like if
hmm
you look at it from a different point of view and you don't look at it as a task you have to get done that you're frustrated with, and you even reframe it in your head before you do it, those things become more enjoyable. Like your feelings, right, and emotions are almost always based on whatever you believe it's going to happen before you even do the thing. And if you just change your reference, just like you did going to the doctor's office, I mean, tell me, was it more enjoyable than when you felt like you needed to rush back to work and didn't want to do it in the first place?
yeah, it went by faster. It was
Yep.
enjoyable. Everything from the when I scheduled my appointment for next year, like, was just good, right?
Yep.
Happy smiles on everyone's faces.
And I think
enjoyable.
that's a good takeaway too, right? Because that can be done with prospecting, right? The episode isn't in prospecting, but like that's the mindset I try to get in when I'm going to work. I'm like, I get to go talk to a lot of people I like to talk to. I get to learn a little bit about their day, how they're doing. We get work done, we accomplish things, but like I try to not create all of this tension and overwhelming worry and anxiety about getting the things done and try to enjoy the process because you're often far more effective when you don't put the stress on yourself before doing it anyway, right? Who performs better under stress, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, you don't need to make it that hard.
you're right. Um, so I know that kind of was a segue
CIA.
there, but all good. I wanted to make one last mention in like the news and stuff like that is, and it's not really news, but TIA policy forum is about 3.5 months away in September in DC. It'll be my third year attending it. I encourage anybody out there who's never been. It's a great chance to go and lobby on behalf of our industry. The points of contact or points of discussion this year are pretty much the same as last year. Rate transparency, the independent contractor, like the whole AB5 thing, fraud. Like those are your big same, same stuff as last year because it's really it's been
But
the
there's some
spotlight of.
changes. I mean, the FMCSA has now hired more people. They've been funded better. They should be doing more safety ratings on the carrier side to catch up with those things. They're doing more for fraud prevention on the FMCSA, like database side. So I'm really
Yeah,
anxious to hear what we learn from this and what some of these things look like a year later.
for sure, for sure. Well, cool, man. Today's episode, we are going to dig into what it is like. Not necessarily what it's like, but building a brokerage, right? And
Yep.
some of the considerations that people often don't think about because you
Yes.
could be, chances are, if you're listening to this, you either have or have considered building your own brokerage, right? Maybe you're an employee or you're an agent or you've already done it. Or you're in the process of doing it right now, building your own brokerage,
Or
getting
you've
your
done it and
authority.
you're scaling to the next side. Maybe you've gotten to 10 or 15 million and you got a team of 6, 8 people and you want to hit 20, 25 and you got to double that. Like that is a different type of business. So like no
Right.
matter where you are, this should be applicable.
For sure. So what we're not going to talk about today is, the legitimate steps using the unified registration
Correct.
system at FMCSA, right? So this is assuming you got your authority, you did your,
Yes.
BOC3, surety bond, application, et
Yes.
cetera. Okay. We're
Correct.
talking about the behind the scenes, what's going on
Yeah.
here. And I will tell you, I've never built one from scratch like you have helped with numerous times. But I have helped get over to the hump to the next level.
Yep.
I've seen last company I was with, we went from like 40 million to like 250 million, right? So and that's a very, very
Huge
different type of
company.
growth
That's like
than
three
that
different
for.
companies. From where you
Yeah,
started, 50 is different than 100. 100 is completely different than probably 150, and 150 is very different than 200. Subjectively speaking, depending on how you're structured, but typically there's huge growing pains getting
oh
25 to
my god.
50, and then
The
50 to 100 are very different, and then
What's
that above.
wild, and we're going to talk about the personnel side of it, but like when you grow, I mean, the hiring part is it's inevitable. Like you can't
Yes.
grow without the hiring. And then you're like, well, what are these jobs that we've never had a title for before? And what is
Yep.
this? Who can do what job? Like, and we'll get there, right? But
Right.
it's just it
Exactly.
blows my mind. Whereas, company I'm with now, Pierce Worldwide Logistics. I've been here for about 4 years and love it. Super happy. But basically came in and changed the business model from it was a primarily W-2 with a handful of agents, and we're like, hey, let's really build this out, create a sales team of agents, and expand our growth and set up all these different options, things that we didn't have before for services, whether it's intermodal, LTL, expedite, and going through that the first year, 2 years was a lot of learning, a lot of things that I never saw before. And to this day, we're still continuing to grow and, do new things and see new challenges. So,
For
whereas
sure.
your side, I mean, you have seen it literally from day one, right?
Yes.
Getting the authority, there's no customers. Like we're starting
Correct.
from scratch. Um, So, I mean, we kind of set the scene there.
Yep. So we'll
That's what
pick it
we're
up
going to
right
do.
from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is going on currently, right? So with one of the clients we're working with, we were setting up the back end, right? And I'm in a more, we'll call it like intensive role than normally like coaching. So like I'm really more involved with this organization. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but so like I'm literally doing this as well, right? And I'll tell you the thing, even in the first month of doing this was like a month or two ago, right? Like just setting up the phone lines, for instance, the CRM and the TMS, right?
The tech
And
stack, all of it, right?
and the thing I want to point out is this, like all human beings, they call it the planning fallacy. We all underestimate the amount of work it will take to do something, and we overestimate our ability. And when you take both of those into it, that means we think it's going to take less time and we're going to get it done faster. My favorite example to prove this is if you ask somebody that is like, call it like consistently late at wherever they go for themselves, right? Like, and the great example is like what they usually account for is they go, oh, well, to leave my house and to drive there takes 15 minutes. I know it takes 15 minutes to drive there. And then they plan for it and they leave their house 15 minutes before they're supposed to be there. And they're there late, right? And it's for usually two reasons. They overlook the time it takes to literally get ready in their house to walk out the door and walk to their car, which might take 5-6 minutes. So right there, there's 30% more unaccounted for. Now they're already 6 minutes late from where they're supposed to be. The other is they don't account for the unintended errors, mistakes, or problems that almost always show up. Traffic, red light, accident, weather, any of those things. Anyone in transportation is familiar with all of them. That's why I kind of picked this example. So you get somebody, right, that will go, oh, they get so frustrated, they blame traffic, they yell at everybody else, but they don't stop to think about like how they actually planned for this in the first place. And the reality is they were responsible. They're responsible because they only gave themselves 15 minutes for what should have taken 21. And they also didn't account for the margin of error, which would have been another 10 minutes, right? If they would have left 25 minutes early or planned to leave 30 minutes early, they would be on time, right? But we all do this in some degree or another, whether it's putting together a tech stack, like I'll explain, a phone system or whatever, something is going to inevitably happen that will create some issue you didn't see. And even going smoothly through it will usually take longer than you expect.
Have you fallen victim to double brokering, cargo theft, or identity theft? Quickscope stands out as the only low-level fraud protection tool available today. Unlike any other solution on the market, Quickscope is deployed post-agreement between shippers or brokers and carriers. Shippers can rest assured that their cargo remains secure. Brokers can confidently confirm the identity of the individuals on site for pickup, and carriers can trust that they'll receive timely payment. Start your free trial with Quickscope today by visiting them online at quickscope.com. That's QUIKSKOPE.com. Blue Book Services is the resource you need if you're transporting fresh produce or lumber. Their online databases contain thousands of companies throughout the produce and lumber industry supply chains. You can easily search their databases to generate new sales leads. Blue Book's credit ratings help you avoid companies with high credit risk, and their team can help resolve disputed loads. To learn more, go to producebluebook.com or lumberbluebook.com and click Join Today.
So the one I wanted to just start with was literally the basics and foundation of a logistics company. And the one thing you need in a phone system for a logistics company are two things: the ability to have lots of inbound calls that don't go to voicemail, because you should be answering. Basically, if you've got a company, someone should be able to answer that phone during business hours. If you're on the phone, you should either be able to answer it and put them on hold or transfer them to another team member so that you have seamless service, right?
I have five. It looks like I have 5 hold lines on my phone right here. So 6 total.
Yes.
10 is like common, right? 5 or
Yes.
10.
So here's what I found out. I wanted to use HubSpot. We talk about it a lot. They have a great, what they call like conversational intelligence package in their sales seats now, which means basically anytime I call a prospect, not only is it recorded automatically, it will also transcribe it. Meaning, like if I make a prospecting call, it records the call, the transcription gets loaded in their contact card, and then a summary or the notes. So I can still type my notes, but that means anything that happens in our system is recorded and saved. Now, it's really valuable for prospecting to help you know what you've been saying, to not miss things. but also even just in a load situation. Customer calls you, maybe you're out of the office, you grab it on your cell phone, they read you it, you write it down, and you want to just check before you book the load. So
Yep.
now instead of me having to email and call them back, I can just look at the recording, see exactly what they said, make sure I got the details right, maybe confirm it. That's important. The other is a carrier. Carrier says they can do something, but then they show up with a different piece of equipment and you swore you said this over the phone 3 times. They say you didn't. They want a truck order not used. If you've got that recording, you now have the protection of, we know what we said. We can now show you. This prevents a lot of issues down the road, right?
Precisely. And in theory, and the concept of it sounds great. And I've used tools like this in the past, but so clearly there's a
Yes.
takeaway here.
Here's the issue, right? The issue is that, like HubSpot says, and they have a list of literally like 110 phone companies that are supposed to be integrated with their product, where you also, the important thing is when you're going through a lead list, you can just hit click to dial. So you save a lot of time in between phone calls, literally even just dialing the phone, right? And all of that is there. HubSpot will even give you a phone number so that you don't even need to integrate another phone. Here's where the unintended issues that I had to deal with were. One is the HubSpot phone will work for outbound calls, but not inbound calls. So if a customer calls me, that doesn't get recorded. So all of a sudden, that doesn't help me whatsoever.
Kind of sounds pointless, doesn't it?
Yes. Now they're getting to it, but don't have it yet. So now go to the second thing. Okay, create a short list. And where did I start? I went to HubSpot and I said, who are the handful of providers you have that have these service integrated with yours? They give me a short list. Okay. I called all 5 of them. All 5 of them said, and this is the kicker, they can handle outbound. They've got tons of features for outbound. You can have an auto dialer. You can do all these cool things. But guess what they don't have? They don't have the ability to have a hold line for inbound calls. So literally every call either goes to a voicemail or it just goes to one person and then will ring inevitably. Just keeps ringing, right?
So I have 2 thoughts here. The first one I'll just say is like, it blows my mind because whenever you call like any major customer service line and you're the inbound one calling them, it's like this call may be recorded for quality assurance, right?
Yes.
Number 2 is, let me ask you this, and this is more of a for the listeners, right? Why, or can I, if it's just me, can I just use my cell phone until I'm ready for a phone system?
And you can, right? And that's the thing. Like, in fact, what we were going to do is use the apps on the phone for the second phone number. Like Ring Central will give you an app on your phone so you can use your cell phone. Now, the problem was Ring Central also couldn't give me hold lines to hold calls and to move them back and forth the way they said they could.
Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you probably need to have the desk phone plugged in.
Well, I had the desk phone, and here was the other issue. The desk phone that Ring gave me, they said they could not, it's called provisioning a phone number to the desk phone. They couldn't provision more than one phone number to it. So I went through Ring Central for almost a year trying to do it with my other businesses. And they're like, yeah, we'll give you more phone lines, but we can't really give you the ability to manage that side. So regardless, tech support, hours with Ring Central, they said they can do it, but when you go to use it, like it just didn't work the way they said. So then all of the other providers don't have the inbound side, right? So then we found one that said they could, and then we connected it. They sent me a phone. It's sitting here. I connected it. I did the integration to HubSpot, but none of the features we paid for in HubSpot functioned. And get this.
Yeah, I've had that same experience where like the phone system itself, we could have internal recordings of outbound and inbound.
Correct.
But if I called from HubSpot,
Yep,
it would only handle the outbound and nothing on the inbound.
Now, here's the issue. If I got to find a call that happened because of a load issue and I want to see what a carrier said or even a shipper said to make sure we understood what happened and maybe where the error was, you'd have to search through all of the times and dates of every phone call made by every user and then find that. And you could, but it is incredibly more work to do it that way than have it in one place, right?
So, yeah, it's funny because I remember having a call once that I was like, I wanted to share this with the boss. And I probably have shared this on the show before, but one of the things my old boss used to do was every morning to our team, he would send out the call log to everyone on the team so you could see like how many calls and the
Right.
total talk time that each person had. It was like a very passive aggressive thing in my mind, but it kept everyone accountable.
But I
But I'm
like
like,
that.
oh, it's
Yes.
like I know the call was around 1 o'clock. It had to be this one right here that was 13 minutes long or
Hmm.
3.5 minutes,
Correct.
whatever. But yes, so
So here's the
it
final
adds all the
kicker.
extra time when you just want to be able to go right into
Right.
CRM and like boom.
And the final kicker was the salespeople at every one of those companies said they were doable because technically they were integrated with HubSpot. And the salespeople didn't know which integrations they was marketing and which were functional. So they just didn't know. And then when you get to the second level of support, I found the same thing. So I had to go to like the third levels of support management in all of these companies to just get a clear answer as to what they could and couldn't do because you can't find any of this elsewhere. And then the kicker at the end was it is doable with the one we have. But there's a third product you need, and that's an integrator product that they give you, but you technically pay for. And then I had to go to them to get the integration details. And on top of that, they needed to create a support ticket, which took a week later. My point in all of this is
Let's
that,
say
like,
let's get to the
even
point, and I got a couple of comments on it too.
that's it. Like the point is that like even though these things and maybe advertise and you might talk to a sales rep, like they might not know exactly the back end. So these are all things that like you would not know could take you longer, and they took significantly longer than they ever should have. But there's not really much you can do about it. And this is
Yeah.
just an example because like you could run into this with a TMS to integrate it with a factoring company. You could run into this where we had this too. Like the TMS we got, I really like that we're using Tie and they have an integration with a factoring company. But as a startup, they've got a minimum amount of loads we've got to be putting through and factoring in order for them to do the integration. So now we've got to move that down the roadmap. And that took a few phone calls to get to that answer. And like when you add all this up, like it is not the few hours on a Tuesday you think to set this up, a few hours on a Wednesday to do this. Like it very well could take you a few weeks just getting responses from the
Yeah.
companies to just get them together so that they all function.
So email's a whole nother one. I don't want to go down a
I'm
rabbit
not
hole
going to
with
go down
it.
the rabbit hole, but I have the
Yeah.
exact same
But
issues because some of the providers will connect with a calendar to Microsoft, but not to
yeah.
Google. And some will give you functionality here and not
We
here.
dealt with that. You and I dealt with that when we first started Freight 360 and we turned it from
Yes,
a fun podcast to an actual company. We're like,
correct.
all right. Like we had this like bootstrapped website and email thing that your son helped set up, and then we're like, let's let's go with the real provider. And I remember for the longest time, like, and now I'm like going down the rabbit hole, and I won't, but like I couldn't get my calendar on my
Correct.
phone and like all this
Yeah.
stuff. I couldn't send invitations to people. But anyway, so here's my takeaways on the tech part of it is number one, and I brought this up a little bit ago. You can start with the basics if it's
Correct.
just you. But what I want to, and you can bootstrap, right? The way that I've always
Yes.
done things is let me add things as I find a need for them versus like fail to start because I don't have a million things in
Yes.
place, right? So you can start, and we always say like do something, right? Just start moving in the right direction and then fill in the gaps as you go. But things to keep in mind when it's not just you and you've got other people accountable, you might be
That's
able to handle the little
chaos.
but extra steps you got to take. But when you're starting to hire team members or you've got a manager or someone who came from another company who's used to have an X, Y, and Z, you've got to have clear expectations and
Correct.
don't try to overhire before you're ready for like imagine if you get to a point where you're going to be fielding hundreds of calls per hour and you got three dudes working on cell phones. Like it's not going to work. It will
Correct.
not work. You need to
And
have a
that's the
phone
point.
system with a main line, extensions, etc. But you can get there over time.
Correct. And that is the tie-in and the message that I want, or the takeaway I think that is important, right? Is that like everybody's in a different stage of this. For sure, you could do this. And I've done this in an afternoon where I can get a send set up, I can get a phone number set up to use to my cell phone, and I can use and set up an email. And all three of those will work. And I could be literally moving freight the next day. Now, in other scenarios, you might be in a business that you are, and I have clients like this that are using some version of that and they're doing $5-10 million a year. And that can work to a point, right? But when you get to maybe the 15 or 20 million, like to your point, people need to communicate differently. People have different responsibilities and they need to be able to function in a way that is different than when you are one person or just two or three. And I thought this was a really good example. And the reason we did it this way for this particular brokerage is because it's got financial backing, they've got customers lined up, they've got relationships, and there's a longer term goal with a financial commitment to get there. Meaning, like, we're going to hire people immediately, already are. So the infrastructure needed to be there sooner than maybe an agent or one person building a brokerage
Yeah.
themselves. But the point holds true again, because even if you're that 4 or 5 person agency or brokerage and you want to get from 15 million to 25 million, these are the things that you want to start looking at, because like they are very
Yes.
important efficiencies your organization gets. Where sure, you can do it without it, but you're going to spend dozens of hours a month amongst everybody wasted in redundant communication, sending things
Yeah.
back and forth over and over again, instead of having them in an organized way where everybody can communicate fluidly.
In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the country. You'll get real-time rates on every lane, so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
So here's my final tech tip takeaway, right? And this is something that I personally do, and I did this over the last 4 years as I've helped on the growth side with Pierce. Is there's always new technology. There's always something you're not using that your competitors might be using. So the big 2 takeaways I have is, and if you can have 2 people doing this, great. But at least one, someone's got to have their finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, what's available, what it could mean for you as a company right now, a year from now, 5 years from now, et cetera. Right. So you need to know what's out there. Take demos periodically. But if the reason I say the redundancy with the second person or even a third is people leave, people get promoted, people forget things, right? And my second takeaway, and I've done this since literally day one when I started with Pierce, is I have a spreadsheet of every vendor that we have set up, what the login is for it, what the password is for it, and we share that amongst the appropriate people. Because if there comes a time, and it could be like, hey, we're not using this tool right now, but we did set it up 3 years ago. The account's not active, but if you want to reactivate it, here's the login. Did you ever go to like create an account and it's like, oh, your company already has an account. Well, who has the login and password?
Jimmy, he's been gone for a year and a half.
Yeah, and it's like, so just like, I know this sounds so basic.
It happens
but
so
it's
often.
so important to like have like just to be organized with what you have. Like think about the basics, like the TMS, the CRM, literally like the stuff I have. I should just pull mine up right now. No, I won't waste the time. But like load boards, hiring,
every
websites,
tech piece. Any website you use, anything you've got to log in for that company that it uses should be saved in one place. And the last point that I would make, just as a tip, that because I try to learn every day and learn from my mistakes and what I can get better at. And my biggest learning experience in all of that was, first of all, most of the support departments, I was able to find the answer faster than them by using ChatGPT, which didn't mean I didn't need them, but it meant I could be in line with what we were looking at. But the second thing is, if you are putting together a tech package or looking at a new suite of tech, meaning you're growing and you want to update these things, I think you should write down, make sure you've got a list of what you have, make a list of what you want, why the features of what you want and what you want to use. And then rather than calling the salespeople, call the support department of every one of those companies and say, this is what we're currently using. This is what we want to use. These are the other products. These are the other features we need access to. Do you guys have integrations? Does that matter? Because your salespeople will tell you completely different than the support people. And then you at least will have some of these answers before you go and sign up and then find out it doesn't work and then cancel it. Like, it'll save you a lot of unintended consequences and headaches.
My last thing I'll say is, if you can, the best of both worlds there is if a company has a sales engineer who, like, they're kind of the middleman between, like, they understand, they
Yes.
can talk the talk of the tech side, but they can also give you the customer experience.
Yeah.
Because people have we've all talked to the salesperson who, like, it can tell you, make you feel great, but they don't follow through on what they promised you. And we've all
Correct.
talked to the tech guy or gal who, like, you just know that they're really good at what they do,
Right.
which is developing software and
Exactly.
technology solutions, but they're not the best at the communication side and the customer experience. Sales engineers are great, where they're like, they're that interface between both sides, and they can understand what your situation is, explain a solution to you from your point of view. Not every company has that. Usually when they scale out, they'll have a sales engineer, but stay up to date on this stuff. To give you more context, like, in the I'm trying to think back to, like, when I started with Pierce, that, like, headcount total users was probably like 30, 35 maybe. And then we're like at probably 100 now. We have since then, we've switched IT providers. That's a whole nother discussion, right? Someone out, if
Yes.
you're going to outsource IT or have someone in house. We have switched phone systems. We have switched TMS models. We have switched. Well, we think about it, like, DAT
Everything.
rolled out DAT
Yeah.
1. Like, so, like, even your vendors will have
New
evolutions in their product.
products.
Like, this stuff is ever changing.
Yes.
AI came out, so now we've got all these new AI companies that are out there. Just so much. And if you don't have your finger on the pulse, you're going to be way behind. So
For
that's
sure.
my take on the tech side of things.
So
What
now we
else?
go from tech. Let's segue into hiring, right? The other fundamental need for a company that is growing, sometimes starting, but like you're moving in that direction and you want to hire, right? And we'll go from like, we'll look at both sides of the fence and we'll start with like the sales side, right? So I would say the first thing that you want to think about when you want to hire more salespeople is, why do you want to hire them, and like, what is the reason, right? And almost everyone says it's growth. Well, we want more customers. And when you ask them more questions, what they really want is they want to either replicate their top salesperson,
Yep.
right? And the other thing is they just want more business without, and this is the important piece, without risking the money of hiring the person that won't fit or work or produce, right? Like, that's the other side of hiring. Hey, if I hire one person and they don't work, like, there's a huge cost to that. It'll take you probably 2-3 months to figure out and to find out they're not a fit. You paid them 3 months of salary and all the hours and interviews you spent before you brought them on, including training them to get into your company, all for nothing. Like, that's the downside when you don't get the right fit. The upside is you end up with a killer, and sometimes they can help fund the next person, right? Or the next 2 or 3 people, depending
Yeah.
on how that plays out, right? So there's a lot to gain and a lot to lose in this process, right? But you and I
Yes.
talked about it like right before. Like, I think the wrong way to go about it is to, or at least this doesn't tend to work out well, is, okay, I've been doing really well. I've prospected. I've got a book of business. I just want to hire the next me that I can give a phone to and these tools to. And then they're going to work from home and then just start bringing me customers. And then we keep 75%, they get 25%, all's right in the world. We're making more money and they're happy, right? Like, why does that typically not work, do you think?
I was While you were asking that question, I was looking up a book I wanted to mention. So restate your question to me.
Okay. So when the person tries to just hire themselves, like, I just want another
Yes.
person like me, right? Like, what typically ends up being an issue or can be an issue in that
Okay,
scenario?
so, and I thought that's what you're asking. I just didn't want to sound like an idiot and answer the
Yep.
wrong question. So I have a few thoughts, because I've done this before, and I think number one is every person is different, and the way that I see myself is oftentimes very different than how other people see me. Right?
Correct.
They see everything through a different lens. I think that there's blinders on. We all have our own set of blinders where there's things that we don't see from an external perspective. There's also things that I think each person is good at that you shouldn't necessarily put that role in somebody else who doesn't have the experience. There may be, am I heading anywhere in the right direction with
You
what
are,
your
right?
intent was?
And
Okay.
and you kind of hit the one piece, right? Like the one thing that I think is really pretty true. So like when you want to hire the salesperson, the things I look for, right, are one, they have ambition or a growth mindset, meaning like they want to get more out of either life or their profession, whether it's income or growth. They are driven in that direction, right? So
Yep.
lots of the logistics companies, really common for them to hire ex-athletes, college athletes, people that are competitive, like because that's at least an example in their life where they are driven to want to improve, right? Because sales is a very much performance and results based profession, right? Like whatever it is, you've got to do more to get more. Even if you're really good at it, the baseline and table stakes are you got to do more. You got to make more phone calls. You got to meet more people. You got to put numbers up on the board, right? So if you can find that person, right, and they do well, the issue is that they're not always the best manager either, because those are very different
Yes.
personalities and skill sets, right? A producer and somebody that can empathize, listen, and understand to a teammate or an employee to help support them, they're very different skill sets. It doesn't mean that one person doesn't have both. It just means that they're not the same thing.
Yeah. I'll give you an example, and then I'll get to the book I was going to mention. So, like, my uncle recently retired, long sales career, was never, at least to my knowledge, was never a manager. Never wanted to be a manager. Made it very clear. He was very, very good at being a producer, a great communicator, building relationships, getting deals closed. But the management side and the training and the leadership side, it's not that someone can't do it. It may not be an interest of theirs, right? And
Correct.
those are two. And you could have someone who's a mediocre salesperson, but a really good leader, right?
Yes.
They may fail at some of the execution parts of sales, but they're just really good at getting the team heading in the right direction and all that. And the book I wanted to point out was it's called Entree Leadership, and it's because it's a mix of entrepreneur and leadership, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's by Dave Ramsey, but it's all about it's basically the playbook of how he started his company, and it's a really good read, and it talks about the like hiring specifically, and I've gone through this with hiring people. We've all been hired
Yeah.
at some level in our career, but hiring and firing are really, really difficult, and
Yes.
they're intimidating tasks, but they are a requirement for any business to succeed. Um, you don't always want to hire the person that's exactly like you. You could butt heads with that person because you just hired your own weird
Yes.
internal competition, which might seem strange. I wouldn't want to work with myself.
Me neither.
But there's people that I love to work with that are nothing like me. There's people that love to work with me, and I'm nothing like them. But there's this balance that everyone kind of adds their own little perfection in a certain area. But and another thing too, and I've like gone through this with some of our branches, is like people, like, their first thought is like, oh, I need to hire someone right now. I'm going to hire my niece or my nephew or
Yes.
my friend. Dude, I literally, like, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I was like, um, this person had tried to go into business with some friends to create basically a team. And I've seen it happen a couple years ago with a couple other folks as well. And in my head, I'm like, I've seen this story play out poorly too many times. They think
Yeah.
it's going to be a great thing. And then next thing you know, like, inevitably, it goes to trash. Like, it goes to shit because one person has a certain vision and set of expectations in their head. The other person has another one. And then they think, because whether they're friends or if you hired a family member, that there's going to be this special different treatment versus a
Correct.
regular standard boss and subordinate employee. And eventually it comes to a breaking point, and it's like tragic when you see it play out, because you're like, man, these people were friends for 20 years
Yes.
and now they don't speak. And you
My
got one
bet.
asking me, has the other one reached out to you, and vice versa. And it's like, had you guys just done, operated separately, but kind of shared successes amongst one another, you could have both cherished and done it like you did in the past when you were coworkers, and
Yep.
decided to try and go to business together. And naturally, one person's going to try and take take the reins more than the other. And yeah, it
It's
creates
so
a
true. My best friend's dad was an entrepreneur and ran a bunch of businesses. And we were little. His name was Leo. His dad's name was Leo. We dreamt of wanting to be in business together because that's what parents did. And he told us when we were probably like 7 or 8, like repeatedly, like, if you guys don't want to be friends anymore, then you guys should start a business. But plan that if you are going to do this, everything that you like about each other will change. And we never decided to ever do anything. We worked together for a time and it did work here and there. But like, to your point, it's easy to get them in, which solves the problem in the immediate, which is what makes everyone feel better, but it is damn near impossible to course correct later because you got another relationship there that is weighing in on the professional one. And it's very hard to let them go or to hold them accountable in some ways because you've never done that with them your entire relationship outside of here. So it's much harder to do that in the professional case, right?
Think about even like you and I working together. You and I have we have a lot of stuff in similar, but I think overall there's differences that complement each other. Like,
correct.
I see you as like a visionary. You always have the next greatest idea, which oftentimes pulls me in a direction that I otherwise wouldn't go in. And I'm very detail oriented. Everything needs to be buttoned up and operational focused, and it really complements each other. And there's a reason that you and I do so well with all of our content and what we do together with Freight 360. But you and I have never operated inside of the same brokerage before. And we had at one point had talked about it and decided like we're better off to not cross that path because it would change everything else that we do that works out great right now. And sometimes you have to have that conversation with people that you're friends with or related to or whatnot, because you will do better on separate tracks and be able to help one another because you're like, think about it. Like you and I've called you and asked questions and advice. You've done the same thing, and we can give each other advice from different perspectives that helps us both. Right.
100%.
Yeah.
And this is a really good segue into like the one thing I'll say too that I do want to cover is this was very apparent how bad I was at this, or maybe the opposite was true, is that like how much I focused on growth and sales and competitiveness, that I was not a good manager. Like when I was a producer, the first time I got put into management, like my late 20s, at a very large sales team, they all did very well, but I absolutely hated it because like I felt they should have been doing as much as I could be doing if I was in their seat. And by helping them, I also couldn't do what I could do. And it felt, even though it probably wasn't true because the company made more money, but I felt like I was like letting myself down every day. It was like this horrible feeling in my chest. And then later when I was at TQL, to your point, right? Like it's a very competitive culture intentionally to get that growth. So like, again, it's not that it's overwhelmingly male, but there is a lot of that energy and competitiveness and aggressiveness in that sales floor. So like, even in hindsight, like only one, maybe two of probably the dozens and dozens of people I worked with, like I was really that close with because we all just competed every day. Like I ran into a guy actually when I meant to meet you up the other day when you were down here, Phil Sweely, who's still one of the top brokers at TQL. He was in my office. But we used to fight and just like kind of jab each other almost every day on who was going to win that week, who got more loads, who had more revenue. And it was like a fun kind of thing. But there was some tension there always because like I wanted to win and like I'll be damned if I'm going to let anybody beat me. That's what made me good at that. But that same thing, and I'll tell you the specific moment that it hit me. We had a putting green in that office, and one of the newer brokers came over and she said like, "Oh, hey, can you show me how to putt?" And I was like, "Yeah, here." And then she did. And I went, "Oh, here, let me show you what you're doing wrong." And I literally said it that way. And I'll never forget because the emotion and feeling I had was like, that was received very poorly. And the look. And then I'll never forget what she said. She was like, "Look, if you want to be in management or a leader, like you should work on your tact or communication when you're teaching someone." And like, I could almost to today, like that feeling is still with me because it was such an acute or like pointed feeling that I just realized like how I just was just completely unaware of how I was helping others because I was just so focused on like, get it done. And the way I look at things, to your point, if it's wrong, just tell me where it's wrong so I can fix it and move forward. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Tell me what's wrong so I can fix it. Not everybody's like that. That doesn't make for a good manager. It took me years to cultivate empathy and understanding to be able to have a conversation that meets them where they are, to show them where they need to go, not assuming they should take my advice from my point of view from where I'm at. And that was a huge learning point for me.
Yeah, so you made me think of something, and this is something I learned in the Army years ago when I was a young lieutenant. And you learn basic levels of leadership, and you make your way up, and eventually you become a leader of a bigger and bigger team
Yep.
organization. And that was someone had demonstrated this to me, and then explained to me later on what they were doing and how it worked. And
And
I thought it
why?
was genius, but it was basically if somebody has a problem and they want a solution, the tactic was, instead of telling them exactly what you would do, present
Yep.
to them a few options of what they might consider doing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason being, like, just because I do it this way doesn't mean it's going to work this way for somebody else.
Right.
So the
But
tactic,
also, you want them to go through the process of evaluating each one and
yes.
finding the fit for themselves.
So, and I'll give you an example of, like, I'll try to relate it to brokerage. Like, I had a guy call me about a month ago, and he's like, "Hey, here's I'm talking to this customer. They gave me this verbal commitment, and the ball's in their court right now. It's at the contract phase, and I'm not sure, like, they're not, like, responding to me. I haven't gotten any, like, answer or, like, update. What do you think I should do?" And in my head, I was like, well, I know what I would do. But then I was like, well, here's a few things you could consider going this route or this route or this route. And it was something like, one of them involved reaching out to the customer about something totally unrelated, but that was value, and then bringing up the real issue
Right.
later on in the conversation. Another one was just hey, go to someone else in the company and try to get an update so it doesn't look like you're being annoying. And then there was, like, another option in there.
Yeah.
And he thought through the different ideas, and he came up with one that was similar to what I said, but he kind of crafted it his own way. And he's like, dude, that was genius. And in my head, I'm like, you came up with this.
You came up with
I
it.
just got you thinking. And that's really,
Yes.
because if I'm like, hey, go do it this way, and he goes to do it that way and it doesn't work, he's like, well, Nate's an idiot. He doesn't know what the hell he's
Yep.
talking about. But you
Exactly.
want to, as a leader, you should really encourage your people to not just get results, but they need to really improve on how they go through the process of
Correct.
getting results, because that is a force multiplier and can that can be used in a multitude of situations, not just the one that they came up to you with.
And here's why that works, right? And then I want to segue into one more thing, because this is a perfect segue, is that if you give someone the answer and it doesn't work, you're responsible for it. Just like you said.
Yep.
Nate's an idiot. It's his fault it didn't work. If you allow the person to take ownership of the solution, they are going to try, meaning they believe it came from them. So they got a couple options, they choose it. Now, good or bad, they're learning. If it didn't work, they know they chose it themselves. So they have to take responsibility for the fact it didn't work and now do it in a way that avoided the reason it didn't work. That is learning, right? That is why you can't teach a kid to ride a bike by riding it for them. You got to let them fall so that they learn from their own choices, not from your choices, right?
Yep.
Which is the perfect segue into the last thing I wanted to cover on this topic, which is no matter how long it takes you to find the right fit, and we've done other content on hiring and interviewing, but let's say you've got a few people, whether it's the carrier side or it's the sales side, you got your teams covering your loads, or maybe you needed more people for growth on the customer, right? Is that, like, however that you have been doing this that has been successful for you, you need to spend the time to actually think about your process, what you do step by step. If it's covering a load, where do you look first? Your TMS. Where do you go next? You look at the load board. Maybe you post the load right before that. Then you call your carriers in your short list. Then maybe you call the carriers on DAT. And then what do you say and how do you have those conversations that allow you to move through those options efficiently to find the right fit for that load, right? And you really got to think about it very simply, as in, like, well, what do you do step by step? Because most successful brokers have a pattern. They just don't even realize they have a pattern when they do that. Same thing for sales. So you want to articulate it for yourself step by step. Just think about simply what you do. And then the important piece is that you don't just hand that list of steps to the new carrier sales rep or the new brokerage sales rep. You then show them how you've done it. You let them watch you do it. You literally do it for them. Let them listen to you. Let them hear what you're hearing. Explain to them why and what you've learned and what mistakes you made that made that list of 5 steps that might have started as 8 different ones or 12 different ones or 3 or 2 or whatever you started with. Explain why you ended up here and why it helps you move faster. So now they understand your steps, your framework, and why and what you've learned along your journey. You've now shown them. Now you need to spend time with them while they start to learn themselves. And that's where that list becomes very important. Because now, if I'm sitting next to Jimmy and I did all those things and he starts on himself, and then he goes through and I hear him calling, the thing you don't want to do is stop Jimmy and go, hey, don't say that. Do what I said. What you want to do is let Jimmy go through the whole thing, maybe work for an hour, and then at the 10 go, okay, let's do a recap. Tell me how it went. Tell me what you think. Let him give you honest feedback on his own process and what he did in his own performance. Then ask him questions. Hey, so tell me what on the steps that we went through worked for you. Tell me which of these steps you maybe felt didn't work for you and why. And make them explain to you what and how they're doing and why they're doing it. Not so that, like, even it's important that I know what they're thinking, because when they are having to explain it to you, they are now thinking through what they just did in a way that is helping them learn faster. Because most people just do things and then don't ever think about what happened when they were doing them. This is the process of being a good leader, manager, or owner, or even a coach. It's not for me to tell somebody what to do. It's for me to help them learn from what they're doing so that they can keep improving, because that's how you teach them to fish, not just feeding them, so that they can do that every day when you're not there. And then maybe when you meet with them 2 weeks and you go, how's it been going? Let's sit again. Let's see how your process is. What have you learned from last week that you're not doing this week? What didn't you do that you are doing? Why did you add these things? Why did you get rid of them? Now you're guiding them through the journey you've taken, and they're far more likely to, 1, succeed, 2, to be able to do it in the manner you expect them to, and 3, if they're not, you are understanding why they're not, so you're not guessing as to why somebody is succeeding, failing, not performing, or not hitting the metrics that you feel they should be hitting, right? That's the disconnect.
Yep, exactly. And if I could describe the skill that you're explaining there, it's problem solving. Like, what's working, what's not working, and problem solving, and just that method of thinking that has broad application. And it, like, legitimately, if you can just train or help somebody learn
everything in life.
Yes, everything, whether it's work, whether it's in management, in sales, in your personal relationships, right? Everyday encounters. You can always tell when you talk with someone who's a good problem solver, who, can think creatively, versus someone who's just like, this sucks, I can't figure it out. Blah, blah. Like, I don't know where to go. It's like, well, take a deep breath. Let's think creatively here. Let's think about what are the issues? What's worked in the past? What hasn't? And I think, yes, that's a skill that'll take you very, very far in your career and running your business.
And here's the thing that I want to wrap up with to kind of juxtapose or lay these against each other. There are 2 very significant approaches that I see in our industry. One, training salespeople, you've got this approach that I would say is far more likely than the other one, which is, hey, be patient, keep making phone calls, you'll find some luck eventually, just keep at it. And it's literally just the task approach. Here's your task. Here's your phone numbers. Here's who you're calling. Here's your list of questions. Keep doing it until you learn, win, or don't have a job. Those are the 3 options. You either learn until you win, or you give up and you fail. That's it. That's all the guidance you're getting. I'd say that's most freight brokerage sales training across the industry, and even a lot of other sales industries, right? What I wanted to do in this episode, we were talking about it, is like, I wanted to be able to show like how you can do this in a way that it also makes owning and running and managing the company easier when you do it the way we've discussed, because you're learning with them what they're learning or not learning. So you're not getting caught flat-footed 3 months in going, what have they been doing for 3 months? Do we fire them? Do we find another replacement? Do we help coach them? Like, where are they? If you're not doing this on a regular basis with any of your employees, you're never going to have the answers for the decision you're asking yourself about, which is, are they the right fit? Are they worth investing more resources to help them improve? Or do you cut your losses? This gives you the information along the way, as well as helps that person give them the most likely shot at being successful in the role you chose them for, right? And if you're not going to do this, you're just half-assing it all together, and you're not likely to succeed if you're not willing to put this investment of your time in the person you spent all this money on. It takes effort to help and bring these people into your culture. You can't just hire them, hand them a suite of tools and a phone, and go bring back customers because they've done it before. They don't know your organization. They don't know what's important to you. They don't know what you're looking for, how you've done it, or where you expect them to go with any of it.
I will close with this. Learning is a continuous thing. We're all, if you don't think that, I think that you're doing yourself a disservice. Continual learning, continuous education is massive. We hired someone to assist me a little over 2 years ago, and to this day, he's come a long way, but he's still learning things, right? I mean, he's two years or so into this process, and I think he's doing a great job. But it's a constant thing, right? You can't hire somebody, just hand them a toolbox, and then overnight they're going to be exactly what you want them to be. It's a continual process. And as you figure out somebody's strengths and weaknesses, you can figure out where to best utilize them and where to best focus on development for them to kind of strengthen some areas that could be improved. You and I, right? We've been in this industry a long time. There's things that we learn every day that we've never dealt with, right? Whether it's a situation that came up that we've never dealt with. It could be something that's just brand new to the industry, right? A new, how are people using AI now? Like new technology and stuff that's out there. New things in the fraud. How are we all handling fraud in the last couple of years versus 10 years ago? I think it's really, really important to always have that mindset of how can we all get better, right? I mean, definitely enjoy your success and where you're at, and be realistic and humble about that. But you got to be hungry for the next best thing, because if you don't, your competition is going to be doing that, and that's going to make them much better. So,
well said.
Discussion, man. That's good. Well, good conversation there. I am curious. I gotta go check out Ken Adamo's debate with Sonar. I did see it in my email from Paul at Freight Caviar that he said sounds like Ken was the winner, but to wrap up from our news earlier on. But anyway, any final thoughts, Ben?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. If you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.